We start this course on landscape as a European identity, this course on landscape, which has the aim to guide you to understand what is landscape today, and also to understand the values of landscape and the tools to discuss strategies, to understand the strategies to protect the landscape. The title is aiming to show to everybody that landscape was acquired as a European identity. This is the first lecture. I will guide you in a few lectures going to understand what is the definition of landscape, how we can play with landscape in many, many ways. Also, we discuss the disciplines of landscape, the laws around the landscape, and tools and actions to understand and defend the landscape. This is an educational course guiding students, teachers, schools to make their work into the landscape, activating their capacity of looking, of discussing, of understanding the quality of landscape. And this is also a way to sensibilize, to make citizens very close to the landscape as a big tool for a better world. I start with the first lecture and take away my image to give you the full screen. The first lecture, lecture number 1, goes to an introduction. An introduction which goes to tell you immediately, how can we define landscape? What is landscape today? What definitions in history and what history of landscape we can discuss, we can present? What landscape, what relevance landscape has had in Europe? How do we experience landscape? This is the following topic I'm going to present you. And how do we perceive and value landscape? So let's start with some image. What is landscape for us? Is only beauty and the romantic view, like the images I'm presenting you, is just beautiful visions, beautiful areas not at all disturbed by any accident and any interruption, any bad image. Or landscape can be much more. This is a famous vision of Assisi, a hill town very famous in Italy. And these are the hilly landscapes in Italy. This is a water landscape in northern Italy, also very beautiful with the balance between ground and water. They are agricultural landscape made by men to perform the best use of landscape. And these are urban landscapes, the famous Urbino and other stone landscape in central Italy, which are the quintessential of the capacity of men to have a dialogue with the geology, with the territory, with the forms of landscape, to shape the life into these places. But landscape is only beauty, or we have to consider all kind of landscape. And of course, the answer is the positive one. We have to be able to be trained and to be educated to a wide consideration of landscape. The invaded coast of our Europe, the new neighborhoods where the car is the main actor and man has not a big space, there is no green, not enough green, only concrete. Then we have railway stations, airports, shopping center, new malls, which are an artificial landscape, which are not the correct way to live. Then we have the polluted landscape, the disasters in landscape, plastic in the water, polluted traffic areas, industries polluting, but also agriculture polluted by chemical products. And then we have the result of disasters. They can be wars, they can be earthquakes, landslides, other natural events. So landscape, first of all, is everything, is every part of our territory. We have to be ready to understand, to describe, to work with our capacity of repairing the interrupted, the broken landscapes, and protect the good and beautiful landscape. But let's start with history, how landscape was defined in the different culture. This is an exercise that you can complete in your classroom with your own discover of landscape. Landscape in the English dictionary was defined in history as a picture of inland scenery or a branch of art dealing with landscape architecture. Or landscape can be the art and science of creating open air spaces as environments for human life, i.e., the layout of gardens and parks. So look how many definitions in history, but they are all positive definitions. Landscape can be a picture of scenery, can even be a branch of art, can be art and science of creating open air spaces, can be the layout of gardens and parks. When we mention landscape architecture, we go to the definition by a famous dictionary of architecture and landscape architecture by the famous Nicolaus Pefner and his colleagues, Fleming and Hugh Honor. The definition says, landscape architecture is the art of science and science of creating open air spaces as environments for human life. Landscape architecture is the layout of gardens, parks, is also the planning of residential, educational, commercial, and industrial sites. So architects and landscape architects are the masters of creating a landscape, so an artificial landscape. But landscape is not a discipline confined to architecture, to architects, and to landscape architecture. Landscape is a much wider concept that we should learn, is a meeting place from all the disciplines possible. Disciplines, scientific disciplines, and also humanities. Let's go to the different languages. I start with my own mother language, which is Italian. In dictionaries of Italian language, there is the understanding, the definition of landscape as a view and panorama, which is already what we said in the English definition. Landscape is also defined as a part of territory that is embraced with the gaze from a determined point of view. So we have to select a point of view from which we can embrace with our eyes the landscape. This is also the definition of a panorama. Landscape is also a definition which refers to characteristic panoramas for their natural beauty or to places of particular historical and artistic interest, but also landscape more generally can be defined the whole complex of natural assets which are a fundamental part of the ecological environment to be defended and conserved. So Italian dictionary has expanded the definition of landscape. Please reflect on this terminology, on this element. This definition talks about natural beauty, talks about places with particular historical interest, artistic interest, but also refers to the whole complex of natural assets, which are part of an ecological environment. And the term defend and preserve or conserve is used here with which opens to a second part of these lectures, how to defend, how to preserve, but also how to repair landscapes. Let's go on with other definitions. If we go to France, we go to the term paysage. You see there is the term pays, so place, and the definition is a spatial extension, natural or transformed by man, which present a certain visual or functional identity. Paysage or landscape in France can be a forest landscape, an urban landscape, an industrial landscape. So categories, typologies of landscape are used here. And also the other definition is the same that we have in Italian and in English. An overview, a vision, an overview or a vision from a given point. We continue and go to the Spanish definition, which also used the term país, and this extension of land seen from a certain place and considered as a spectacle. So we add this definition. Landscape is a spectacle, of course. In history, landscape is the beauty, the essential, the quintessential of beauty is a spectacle. And to enjoy this spectacle, we have to raise to a given place where we can dominate and enjoy the spectacle. Then we go to German, is a wider definition taken from Duden dictionary. Landschaft, which has land, like in English, land and not pays or place. So Landschaft regards the external appearance shaped in a certain way part. So, but this external appearance is the shape of the ground, is the vegetation, the buildings, the settlement. So you see also here a wide, comprehensive understanding of landscape, also buildings, also settlements, so also urban areas. And these places are shaped in a certain way, or they are areas in a certain part, or they are areas of the Earth's surface, area of the Earth that differs from other areas by characteristic external features. So this is just a preliminary assemblage of definitions. I ask you, as a first exercise, you could stop reviewing this lecture at this point. After a series of definition of the most spoken languages, you can search your own definition of landscape in your dictionary and try to understand the meaning of the word landscape in your own language, in your own culture. So from the meaning and from the definition of in dictionary, you can go to understand how your culture has defined landscape. And here we continue, because in the preliminary introductory lecture, we have to go to discuss types of landscape. How can we define landscape, taking examples in our activity of understanding what is a landscape, how a landscape is organized. I, of course, start from the Italian culture. Landscape in Italian culture is a very strong concept. And we had in 20th century, in the beginning and during 20th century, different experts on different topics, on different disciplines, like geography, history, architecture, geology, etc. But also starting from literature, from humanities. Lucio Gambi was one of these experts, writing a lot and defining a lot the concept and the education to landscape. The definition of landscape by Gambi is landscape consists of that set of things and objects that we see for a more or less large space around us when we reach a dominant position. This is part of a lecture that he gave in the 70s of last century to a high school class. I will propose this lecture as an exercise to you at the end of this first lecture among us. So the definition of Gambi is similar to the one we have gone through from dictionaries. But let's go to other experts on landscape. After Lucio Gambi, we go to Aldo Sestini, an expert on landscape in a wider way, on a geographical way, describing the forms of landscape, describing the flora of landscape according to its morphology, but also describing the language, the landscape as a place which is used by men and transformed by men. So let's go to this geographical landscape. What is geographical landscape? How can we express this terminology of this type of landscape? Is the complex combination of objects and phenomena linked together by mutual functional relationships, position, and as well as by position, so as to constitute an organic unity. So landscape is organic unity, is described by its position, but also the dialogue, the relationship between the functions. This is the book that he wrote, and here you can see the description is a design of an aerial view of landscape. You can recognize, even if it is a black and white sketch done in the 60s, you can recognize the variety of a hilly landscape with the mountains at the end of the image. In the first position is a town which raises from the geology. Then there is a river excavating a deep element into this. Then we see cultivated area. So it is an urban landscape, an agricultural landscape, is also a forest landscape and urban landscape. This is the geographical. So the geography as a discipline having a big part in the description of landscape. Then we have to distinguish by natural landscape. Can we still have natural landscapes? This is really an open question, because natural landscape is what relates to a physical place. Can be the Alps, can be mountains, can be very old lakes or places which have not been transformed by man. So this is a physical place, can be plains, mountains, rivers, forests, everything that has the properties of the extension or surface relief. From natural landscape, we go to agrarian landscape. We have here another very important scholar, researcher in landscape, which is Emilio Sereni, who wrote a very important history of the agrarian, agricultural landscape of Italy, region by region, province by province. And this is still a tool to guide us to the description of agricultural landscape. So what is agricultural landscape for Emilio Sereni? Is the form that man, in the course and for the purpose of his agricultural production activities, consciously and systematically imprints on the natural landscape. So from the natural landscape, we go to the transformations that man has done in different places, in different cultures, for a use, an advantage of landscape. This form is historically determined by the evolution of crops and agricultural techniques. And this is one image, but we also have already explained some images of the cultivated lands where we can grow different plants, we can grow olive trees, we can grow grapes, etc., etc. Rural or artificial landscape is another definition. Includes the concept of transformation of the territory for a productive or aesthetic purpose. It manifests itself through the intervention of man who modifies the territory and characterizes it according to his own economic needs. So it's complementary to the agricultural landscape. And here is an image that explains you vineyard, but also cultivated lands. So man transformed the natural landscape into a rural or artificial landscape for its advantage of use. In the history of Europe, we have many, many layers of transformation, which make our continent a fantastic and a wide collection of different forms, different colors, different cultures, which represent a diversity, which is one of the big values of landscape. We close with the urban landscape. We have already said something on urban landscape. We see the beautiful image of the aerial view of Siena, a very famous medieval town in Tuscany with its Piazza del Campo. Urban landscape embodies a high historical cultural significance. This is also a very important kind of landscape, which is an identity of Europe, of course, with all its differences. And we can say that through urban landscape, every civilization tells its story. So urban landscape is also something defending a story, a culture, a long-lasting culture, and becoming today a landmark or an element to be defended and to be protected. So here, other landscapes in central Italy, which represent a big part of our culture. Again, Ascoli Piceno, the big square, monumental square of the city with the town hall, the Renaissance hall, the medieval church, and the 19th century porches that protect the use of this place, and Matera, and also a water city, so extended on the coast. This first lecture is ending with the workshop I propose you. The first exercise I propose is on dictionary. Go to find the definition of landscape in your language and what is also the description, what is the meaning of landscape in your culture. But also your exercise in your classroom is to observe the landscape around you and take a few photographs to share in your classroom. You can describe landscape on the way to school, on the way to your playground, on the way to your holidays. How is the landscape that surrounds you? How can you describe it? How can you select a typology according to what we have shown in the lecture? Geographical landscape, natural, agricultural, rural, artificial, urban landscape. I leave it to your work with your teachers, and this is the conclusion of the first lecture. Thank you for following the lecture. See you in the next one.